right, we are 2/3 live. Welcome everybody to the Gunner Technology Livestream, a weekly tech talk for non-techies and techies alike. I'm your host, Derry Merkins. With me is CEO of Gunner Technology, Cody Swan, and with us is a very special guest, Frank Kane from Sundog Education. Thanks for joining us today, Frank.
Thanks for having me.
Frank, I don't know if you've tuned into the live stream before, but we usually
I took a quick peek a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, we usually just mess around for like 5-10 minutes out of the gate. So actually, quick question. I noticed in your video series that you said you were in Florida. We actually have an office in Port St. Lucie. Are you anywhere near there?
It's a few hours away. I'm actually around Orlando, so closer to the theme parks and whatnot.
Oh, okay. Do you know Robert Dempsey?
I do not.
Okay. He was there with the tech scene in Orlando for a while, but he's been gone for a number of years. I just didn't know. That's the only person I know in tech in Orlando. That's it. So, and I know Orlando's a pretty small town, so I'm shocked that you haven't heard of the one person that I'm asking about.
Absolutely. It does have a surprisingly large tech scene, but it's not just theme parks, guys.
So I guess we can dive into the Country Store giveaway. You can sign up for the Country Store giveaway on our Facebook page. Country Store is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. You can visit them at countrystoreoutfitters.com. The winner of our Country Store giveaway this week is Kenneth, I guess why, I'm not going to give away his last name, from Waukesha, Wisconsin. Do you guys know where Waukesha, Wisconsin is?
I actually do. It's pretty close to this Cider Boys Brewery or Cider Boys Cidery.
I feel like your landmarks in any state are breweries.
That's right. That's what I say. I know that because they have great cider and their logo is a Great Dane, and I have 3 of those. So so I was intrigued by their branding, to say the least.
So Ken, you've got Country Store hat heading your way along with copies of our ebooks. Anyone who didn't win this week can sign up on our Facebook page. While you're on our Facebook page, answer our question of the week, which this past week was virtual girlfriends or boyfriends, yay or nay? And overwhelmingly, the vote was nay. Have you heard about this, Frank? There's a new service called, I think it's called Invisible Girlfriend, maybe. And basically, there's a real person on the other end, but they interact with you as if they were your significant other. That's a new service being offered.
I have heard about this. Yes, I cannot say I've partaken in it.
It's got the reason I posted it is I watched Blade Runner 2049 the other day, where he has that virtual girlfriend. And I don't know if this is the wave of the future or not, but it seems mildly scary.
It's a wave, all right.
And actually, the question of the week of this week, and Frank, I don't know if you are a Game of Thrones viewer, but we have a special question of the week this week, which is, did you watch the series finale of Game of Thrones? And if you did, let us know what you thought in the comments section. Did you watch the series finale of Game of Thrones?
I am one of those strange people who have not watched a single episode.
Not a single one?
Not a single one.
See,
I hear about it a lot.
I was going to say this is going to be so appropriate for your Elasticsearch series because so much of it is based on movie ratings. A lot of the examples you go through are movie ratings, and it's one of the most amazing collapses in ratings history. The show is consistently like 8 or above, like usually 9 or above for a lot of episodes. And the past 3 episodes were on IMDb, it was like 6.2, and the series finale was 4.3.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I used to work at IMDb, so I've definitely seen that sort of a thing happen. Usually it's from concerted review bomb attacks, but this time it seems like it kind of deserved it from what I've heard.
Yeah, so. it's like universal hate for this episode. People
at least we can be united around something.
Yeah, exactly. What did you do at IMDb, out of curiosity?
I ran their technical team for a couple of years. So IMDb is actually a subsidiary of Amazon.com. So toward the end of my tenure at Amazon, I hid out over there for a couple of years and just thought about movies for a while.
That's awesome. What kind of products did you work on?
While I was there, we made their first mobile app, for one thing. So if you have the IMDb app on your cell phone, that happened on my watch, at least originally. We also did a bunch of platform architecture stuff.
Yeah, that's a mainstay on my phone, and I've been trying to get rid of as many apps as I can, but that one's on there.
Cool. Mine too.
How did you guys do anything to deal with review bombs? Because I know that's a huge thing now with the Game of Thrones episodes would always have, they would have 10,000 10-star reviews and 10,000 1-star reviews before the episode even aired.
Yeah, I mean, review fraud is like a huge problem, and there's really no good solution to it. I mean, they did have a bunch of secret sauce under the hood to try to like make sure that the reviews were at least coming from real people.
Mhm.
Can't get into the details because then people would know how to game it. But yeah, it's just a never-ending battle.
Yeah, I guess we can like maybe that's a good place to start off. What's your background in tech? And I guess how did you come around to all this Elasticsearch stuff?
Oh yeah, it's been a journey. I actually started off as a video game developer way back in the day. So if
No
you remember
way.
like Sierra Online and Leisure Suit Larry and all that stuff, that's
Oh
where I
my
got my
Leisure
start.
God,
Suit Larry.
that is
Yes,
amazing.
I worked on Leisure Suit Larry 7. I'm not proud, but it's true. At least the Mac version of it. But yeah, after that, I went and worked in like the simulation and defense industry for a while, which kind of brought me to Orlando for a while, and doing like virtual reality training stuff. And one day, Amazon.com gave me a call out of the blue and said, "Hey, you want to come to Seattle and do some stuff up here?" This is back in like 2003, I think. So Amazon was a much smaller company back then. So at that point, I went up there to Amazon, started working on their recommender system. So things like people who bought this also bought personalized recommendations, all that stuff back when it was like brand new. Stayed there for like 10 years. And after that, I figured let's go back to the sunshine in Florida because Seattle's kind of gloomy. And yeah, I started working for myself. And now I'm like mostly doing online education stuff. So doing massively, MOOC stuff on various platforms, including Elasticsearch, big data, machine learning topics. And yeah, that's what's paying the bills these days, just making online courses in hot technologies.
Actually, before we dive into MOOCs, because that's a really interesting topic, your company does like visualization software. I was trying to sort of get a handle on what the non-educational side of Sundog does.
Yeah. There's basically two things that I do. So after I left Amazon, I had like a non-compete agreement, so I couldn't do anything in this field for a while. So instead, I did computer visualization stuff. So what Sundog software does, as opposed to Sundog education, is real-time like OpenGL and DirectX software libraries for visualizing clouds, the sky, weather, and oceans. And these are used in video games, training simulations, military simulations, things like that.
That's so cool. I was watching some of the videos, like the wave videos. Do you visualize rogue waves?
It can be done. There is a way to like inject waves into the system, and we have some customers that are doing really weird stuff with it. So yeah, I'm sure someone's doing that.
Also, is Sundog named after? Because I was looking at because there's a restaurant called Sundogs at the beach where I go in North Carolina, and I always thought it was just like a slang term for somebody who hangs out in the sun all day. But apparently, there's like an actual sundog that's like some weird, like something to do with the sunlight refracting or something off of
Right.
ice or something like that. Is that where the name
Yeah,
came
that's
from?
how it got its name. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, basically, like if you have the sun at a certain angle in certain icy conditions, like there'll be like a little tiny rainbow on either side of the
Yeah,
sun, and that's called a sundog.
it's pretty cool
Uh,
looking.
yeah, but since the
Sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was just gonna say, since the company had to do with atmospheric simulation, we just kind of like went through the list of atmospheric effects and found the first one that wasn't trademarked. So that's how
Sundog
we
it
got
is.
our name. Yep.
So talk about MOOCs. How did you get involved in that? This is a subject that's near and dear to my heart because I was actually one of the inaugural members of the OMSCS program at Georgia Tech. I don't know if you've heard of that. Um, but so MOOCs are sort of like taking over the world right now.
Yeah, they're changing the world, and hopefully in a good way. I mean, we talk a lot about the democratization of education these days. So anybody who has expertise in a field can put out a course, and if they have enough authority and know what they're talking about and are conveying it effectively, then they'll find an audience, and potentially spread that knowledge throughout the world. I have like 300,000 students all over the planet right now, and that sort of impact is kind of awesome. You can't get that in a classroom.
Yeah, and the other thing I've heard too, and I've heard professors talk about this, is that they would give the same lectures over and over and over and over again, and they would hone it down to the point where it was as close to perfect as they could get the material. And so once they had it to that point, there's really no reason to contain it within the classroom. If you have if you have everything laid out and you're not going to change it in any sort of way, you might as well put it up online so that vastly more people can consume it.
Yeah, it allows you to be a lot more concise and think a lot more about how you're delivering this information too. Like you're not just making it up off the cuff in front of a classroom. You can re-record it if you screw something up and like
Right.
figure out a better way to present it and keep it updated over time a lot more easily.
So what sort of MOOCs have you produced other than this Elasticsearch and Elastic Stack one? Are you mostly in the machine learning arena?
Yeah, kind of my expertise is in the big data and machine learning fields. So I'm trying to kind of spread the stuff that I learned at Amazon about doing stuff at massive scale and doing recommender systems and machine learning at that scale. So, on the Manning platform, who kind of connected us together, we have the Elasticsearch course and also a ultimate big data course, they call it, which is sort of a higher level overview of big data technologies. And then outside of that platform, I have courses on AI, machine learning, deep learning, recommender systems, Apache Spark, all sorts of cool stuff.
And those are all on sundogeducation.com. Sundog.
Yeah, you can head to sundog-education.com. Don't forget the dash.
Don't
and
forget the dash.
they're all there.
Yeah,
Yep.
links are below, by the way. Everyone
Cool.
should check out all these courses. Talk about your time at Amazon a little bit. You were there for how long now?
About 9 years, all in all.
And you were working on the recommendation stuff. So if you like this product, how big was the team working on that kind of stuff?
Oh boy. When we started, not very big. Like back in 2003, like I said, Amazon was a much smaller company than it is now. We all pretty much fit into one building, So the people.
That's crazy to think about. My goodness.
Yeah, like you could go to the bathroom and you'd be like standing next to Jeff Bezos. So that's kind of trippy in hindsight.
That is nuts.
But yeah, it was only like maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 people maybe at that point that were working on this stuff. And that's kind of remarkable because it's been reported, I can't give away actual numbers, but it's been reported that up to 20% of their revenue came from these systems. And I think they still do today.
Wow.
So that predates AWS then, right? Because AWS.
Oh, by far.
What's that?
By far, yeah.
Yeah, by far. Which is interesting because AWS is sort of taking over the cloud computing world. And one of the things that I've been following pretty closely because we use it so much is their Elasticsearch service and kind of their kerfuffle, if you will, with the open source aspect of that. Have you been following that news at all?
I don't know what's going on behind the scenes there. You might know more than I do about that, but I have noticed that they are slowly saying we're going to replace what we have with an open source version real soon now. It does sound like there's some drama going on there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, because they had the same thing with MongoDB, and they're kind of doing that same thing. And but it's a great service. I don't know if you've actually played around with Elasticsearch service on AWS, but it's kind of like a managed instance, which eliminates a lot of the can you say learning curve for setting up an Elasticsearch service and just kind of diving in. It's great for we've built a lot of GraphQL APIs around it and things like that.
Yeah, they have good integration with Kinesis Firehose and technologies like that as well. So as part of the AWS ecosystem, they've kind of figured out how to wedge it in there.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's a good walkthrough on that. I think it's like the penultimate video in your course is Elasticsearch service, I think. Yeah,
there's the AWS one, and then there's the one that Elastic.co offers as well. And that's sort of a higher level offering, I'd say.
Yeah, it's like one step more abstracted, right?
Right. Yeah. Like it's super easy to set that up. So, obviously I think it costs a little bit more, but, it is the latest and greatest software directly from elastic.co. So yeah, it's got that going for it.
That's from the guys who are actually building Elasticsearch, right? Or who actually built it back in the day.
That's right. Yeah. So you kind of have to wonder what they really think of the AWS service. It's to their standpoint, it's kind of a competitor,
Right.
I guess that might be sorry, go ahead, Cody.
I was saying we always get ahead of ourselves on this show. Can you take a step back and give us a quick overview of what Elasticsearch actually is?
Oh yeah. We should start there, shouldn't we?
Yeah, exactly. We always do. We always manage to do this. And
it is for non-techies as well, so it's probably a good place to start.
All right, so let me explain it for non-techies. Basically, like if you go to a big website like Wikipedia or something and type something in, something behind the scenes is trying to map what you typed into an actual document, right? So there is what we call a search engine that's trying to say, okay, you're looking for this phrase, this set of phrases, a set of words. Here are the documents that are most relevant to what you're searching for. So one way you can use Elasticsearch is as a big distributed search engine that can just scale horizontally and handle massive amounts of traffic. So under the hood, it's using an open source technology called Lucene, and they've just figured out a way to distribute that and make it more scalable. But a lot of people aren't really using Elasticsearch for search these days, which is kind of interesting. Because in addition to doing search, it can also aggregate data that is indexed into its search index. So a lot of people are using Elasticsearch as a way to sort of have a really quick and dirty way of analyzing metrics and weblog metrics and things like that. So think of it as a way to build your own Google Analytics from scratch that actually does a lot of the same stuff and very quickly.
Yeah, and log files is a big use of Elasticsearch too now, right? People are using it for filtering log files and making sense out of log files. I've seen that, and we've tinkered with that model as well. Yeah,
I think that's probably what's being used the most for these days. What's really cool about Elasticsearch is that it can do things instantly that, other technologies like Hadoop or Spark would, take orders of magnitude more time to come back with an answer for. So you can just interactively say, I want to see all the 500 errors from, this time to this time, from this server. And it'll say, okay, here you go. Boom. Here's a bunch of like pretty graphs for it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where like the, I know you talked about the Elk stack. I think it's not called Elk anymore because there was something
the Elastic
called,
Stack.
Yeah. Yes. There's something called is it Firebeat? Is that the name of the
FileBeat?
FileBeat, that's it.
Yeah.
I don't know why they don't call it Fleck. That seems like such a perfect acronym for that. But so Logstash and Kibana is what actually allows you to sort of visualize what's going on with your servers in real time, basically.
Yeah, there's more to Elasticsearch than just Elasticsearch itself these days. There's Logstash and the Beats framework, which take care of the problem of how do I actually get the data from my servers into Elasticsearch to be analyzed. And that's a big problem in and of itself. And then we have the actual visualization piece, which is called Kibana.
And it's the reason that you can do all this kind of stuff is just because Elasticsearch is based off of text. So anything that's stored as text, you can basically, analyze just like you would any other kind of data.
Yeah, I mean, it's all based on a document-based model. So you can have like types to your data. Like it's not just for text. You can actually have numerical data and aggregate numerical data together as well. But it turns out that the same, inverse indices that you use for search are also useful for aggregating data if it's sorted in the right way. So they've kind of like used properties of search engines and by this sort of happy accident come up with this way of like really efficiently analyzing numerical data as well.
Yeah, a lot of the examples in the video series were like aggregating ratings, getting average ratings for stuff like that. So you can actually do some pretty powerful data analysis just with Elasticsearch.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's not just for search anymore, as I like to say.
Elasticsearch, not just for search anymore. That's a.
It should be their tagline. I should charge them for that.
Totally. So where do you see the? Because like we've just been talking about, the Elasticsearch has been used for way more than just search. What do you see the future? I mean, we have a lot of new-ish type hype in tech all the time. Do you see Elasticsearch fitting into some of the newer hype machines that are coming out recently with, like, for example, serverless? And we talked about, how AWS has a managed service and there's other ones for Elasticsearch. But from an infrastructure standpoint, even from kind of like an implementation standpoint with the technologies, what do you see kind of the future of Elasticsearch?
If they're thinking about fundamental changes to their architecture and like a serverless offering, I don't know about that. I'd be surprised if they did that because it would be such a fundamental retooling of what they are. Mm-hmm. But it seems like the way that they're staying relevant is just by adding new features that are sort of tapping into the tech zeitgeist right now. So, for example, they have machine learning capabilities in Elasticsearch now, and you might wonder, what does that have to do with, analyzing log information? But they can use that for like detecting anomalies automatically and things like that. So that's one example. And they're also doing things like SQL integration now. It seems like SQL has kind of become the lingua franca of big data these days. So you can now query your Elasticsearch server just using straight up SQL. So,
and you can do it for. Sorry, I gotta switch my camera. You can do like larger scale text analysis. Like I know you go through Shakespeare in the video series, but one of the interesting things, I don't know if they probably didn't use Elasticsearch for this, but one of the interesting things that I saw recently is, I mean, there's the Shakespeare authorship question, I guess, has been around since basically Shakespeare died. And one of the things that they've done is actually used, I guess, ML to sort of determine who actually wrote Shakespeare's plays. And I think one of the interesting things they found is that he had like a bunch of collaborators on the early plays, but they basically said he wrote everything after that, which sort of put a nail in the coffin. It's interesting the kind of text analysis you can do.
It is. Like I actually discovered that by accident just making this course, actually, because one of the examples I gave for using Kibana to visualize information was making a big tag cloud out of the phrases that are used in the works of William Shakespeare. And, when you look at this tag cloud, you see the same phrases being used over and over and over again across all of his plays. And like, that might suggest that it was actually the same dude, at least for the plays that came up. So, yeah.
Who was it? Was it Gloucester? Was he the one who was in like...
Yes.
Like so many of his plays?
Yeah, that was like, the number one guy who talked, it seems. And I never even heard of him until I did this course.
And I liked how, I think it was like exeunt was like the number one
exeunt. Right. Yes, that's the number one phrase in Shakespearean.
Yeah. There's another really interesting text analysis too. I don't know if you saw this. there's been an authorship question with the Federalist Papers where
Hmm.
they were trying to determine whether Hamilton or Madison wrote. There was like a half dozen where they didn't know. I think John Jay wrote some too, but they knew which ones were his, and they basically ran through all the Federalist Papers and were like able to conclusively say Hamilton wrote these, Madison wrote these. So all this stuff is just super
Hmm.
cool to me.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine using like a neural network to do the same thing too. Like train it on a set of documents with known authorship and like feed in some documents of unknown authorship and see what comes out. Like that's just a standard classification problem at that point.
Maybe to get in like a more technical thing in terms of like how would you build a neural network using Elasticsearch in terms of like the resources you need, how to shard it, and stuff like that?
I've never thought about doing that. I mean, they do have like some ML capabilities under the.
So it's really sort of like just a black box solution.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to build a neural network, like specifically you want to do deep learning, you probably want to use a different tool like TensorFlow or something like that that's
Mhm.
built for that sort of a thing, right? And there's obviously a bunch of cloud-based solutions that will do this for you as well now as well. I mean, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they all have their own platforms for that.
What
which
are
is
some?
crazy, right? I
Sorry,
mean,
go ahead, Jody.
to touch on that, like it's almost amazing how quickly you can get up and get a neural network started or any sort of machine learning capability with, like you said, Google, TensorFlow, Amazon
Yeah.
has SageMaker. It's crazy that they're exposing these capabilities to people. Like, do you see that kind of changing? What sort of ramifications do you see from that, where we have kind of more like less data scientists and more like
hmm
viewers having access to these types of tools in such an easy to use way?
Yeah, I mean, specifically with like what we call transfer learning, it's incredibly easy to take a pre-trained model that somebody made and like apply it to your own problem, especially in like image classification and stuff. So literally a couple of lines of code is all it takes these days to actually get a complex AI-based image recognition system in place.
Yeah.
And that's both wonderful and horrible, right? like
Right, right.
like you can build great things with that. So for example, I recently bought a Raspberry Pi here, and the idea was I was going to build this thing for my wife who like rescues sea turtles on the weekends.
Oh, cool.
I'm like, if I can make an image classifier, I could hook this up to a camera that goes beep whenever it sees a stranded sea turtle on the beach. Like, that's great. And there's like literally about 10 lines of code that runs that because it's so easy to do now. On the
Yeah,
flip side, of course, you could, create a surveillance state and do all sorts of terrible things and profile people. And, that gets into the whole ethics of AI thing, which is probably a topic for a whole other show.
And actually,
yeah. That's fascinating. I just saw that San Francisco basically passed a law that said they're not going to allow facial recognition software. For exactly what you said, they feared a surveillance state.
Yeah, and a lot of times people build these things not really out of malice. It's kind of like in Jurassic Park, when Jeff Goldblum says, we're so excited about being able to do this, like that we could do it. We didn't stop to ask if we should do it, right?
yeah.
Same story here. A lot of people are just like caught up in like the excitement of the technology and saying, "Look, I can make an awesome facial recognition system with like 2 lines of code. Isn't that awesome?"
Yeah.
And then their employer's like, "Yeah, that is awesome. Let's use it for something evil," right?
I mean, we talked about that too with the Cambridge Analytica stuff back in the day when people were talking about like how to punish them or like, how to shut this down. And the point that Cody and I kept making is that once you have the model built, you don't need the data anymore. Like you need the data to
That's
build the
right.
model, but then, it's useless at that point.
Yeah, once you have like the weights between the neurons, that's all you need, right?
Yeah.
So that's a secret sauce.
We actually have an interesting question from Facebook, which is, as a non-technical person, how do I get started with this stuff?
Ooh, is he non-technical? Well, if you're like, it depends on how non-technical you
I
are.
would imagine they know how to use the computer and like can
Yeah, I mean, if you
watch
want
your
to like
videos and fiddle around a little bit, I guess.
yeah, if you're going into the fields of like big data and machine learning, I would say start off by learning how to do some programming. Probably in Python would be the best place to start. That seems to be sort of the language that has the most traction in these fields. You don't actually have to know how to program to use Elasticsearch necessarily, but for the larger field, I would say that would be the place to start. And from a mathematical standpoint, if you do want to get more into machine learning and AI, some linear algebra would be a good place to pick up some expertise as well. Once you have those, go on the MOOCs and you can learn whatever you want in a few hours, really.
You have any courses on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I actually have a free YouTube series on deep learning. And like in about 3.5 hours, we cover all the basics. So like if you do have that basic background in programming and linear algebra, it doesn't take long to figure out how to make a image recognition system or a sentiment analysis system. We actually walk through both of those examples in the course.
Very cool. Let's talk about some more use cases because we've sort of talked about logs and how to sort of, I mean, you can use it both for monitoring and I guess for like after the fact data analysis. But how else is Elasticsearch being used?
Well, of course, it can be used for search. So, if you are building a big
The
website and
OG.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So, like if you're doing like IMDb, one cool thing it can do is search as you type as well. I think that's kind of a cool system too. So, as you start to type something in, Google and stuff will start to auto-complete it and try to guess what you're trying to type. Elasticsearch is fast enough to pull that off. So you can actually like send to Elasticsearch, here's what the users typed in so far. What do you think they're trying to say? And it'll say, here's a bunch of examples of what it might be.
Yeah.
So
There was
that's
a
one
cool
cool
thing in your
application.
series too about like breaking it up by n-grams, I think you called it. And you can search not necessarily just on a substring, but these letters appear in sequence in this term as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it works under the hood, or one way of doing it under the hood. Basically you construct these trees of like, here's the first letter they type, here's the second letter, here's the third letter. What does that match up to? And just pre-computing all of that as part of the index so you can get that back really quickly.
Yeah, and it really is fast, super fast, Elasticsearch.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that you want to like associate Elasticsearch with in your head, it's fast. I mean, that's what it's all about.
I guess everything. Talk about how the data is actually stored with Elasticsearch. I guess for somebody maybe coming from the old school database background where there's tables and rows and columns and stuff like that, how does Elasticsearch actually store the data?
You can think of it in similar terms to a database, although under the hood it's very different, of course. But basically, instead of a table, we have what's called an index. And an index will contain a bunch of documents of some given type that represents some, common concept. Got some dog drama here, it looks like. Cool. But yeah, I mean, that's the basic object model there. We basically have indices. Indices contain documents, and the index can have types associated with it that define the structure of those documents within the index. Then under the hood, Elasticsearch is responsible for distributing that information in a redundant way. So it's really clever in how it does that. It makes sure that everything is backed up in more than one spot, and in such a way that if one of your servers bursts into flame and melts into a gooey puddle of silicon, things will just keep on running. So
It'll keep cruising.
Yep.
I had a question too about. I was reading recently. I guess it wasn't that recent, maybe a month or two ago, about a huge Elasticsearch data leak. I think it was like some financial company who leaked like 12 or 14 million loan documents data or something like that. Talk about security with Elasticsearch. Would that, I assume that would be entirely on them, but how do you sort of secure your Elasticsearch instance?
I mean, they have like every tool you could imagine for securing this stuff. So yeah, it's on them ultimately at this point. If you're just using straight up Elasticsearch, they have Elasticsearch security that's actually now included for free as part of Elasticsearch itself. So it used to be they would actually charge extra for those capabilities, and they realized maybe that's not a great idea for the greater good of humanity. So we'll make security free. But yeah, they cannot. It's like just a couple of settings. Basically, you can encrypt stuff over the wire. You can encrypt it at rest, and they have multiple ways of handling authentication to the servers as well. They can integrate with Active Directory and stuff like that pretty easily.
And what's this might be more of like an Elastic, an AWS question, but talk about scaling with Elasticsearch. How does it scale up and down as sort of in terms of traffic and handling spikes and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing is you can always add more and more read replicas to Elasticsearch as time goes on. So, if you're getting a lot more queries to Elasticsearch, say you're like, fronting an actual search engine on a big, huge website, just keep throwing more servers at it. It's all horizontally scalable, and the masters will figure out, hey, these new nodes exist now. I can start distributing data to them. I can start reading from them.
Yeah.
So that's pretty easy to do, whether or not you're in AWS or any other platform. That's kind of built into Elasticsearch itself.
I want to say in terms of cost too, on the low end, it's like $300 for an Elasticsearch instance, and maybe like $3,000 for a high end one, something like that. So
yeah, I haven't.
It does add up, I guess. But
yeah, I mean, we're assuming these are big. If you have a big enough website for that kind of traffic, then we assume you have big money too.
Right.
But a single server can still do a lot. But obviously, you want at least 3 for redundancy purposes.
And you can run it locally too. Like I know a lot of your course is setting this stuff up locally, but it's you can set it up locally and mess around with it just to learn it.
Yeah, that's what we do in the course. Basically, we set up a little virtual machine running Ubuntu on your desktop, whatever you happen to be running locally, and just install it from scratch, using apt and whatnot. And it's not too hard to set up. Just got to go tweak a couple of config settings and you're up and running, basically.
And in terms of the queries too, I mean, you're basically just working with, for the first part of the course, it's just curl and JSON, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's not pretty to look at, but the good thing about like going to that low of a level is that what you learn is portable to whatever clients you might use down the road, right?
Right.
So in the real world, you'll probably be using some sort of a client API to interact with Elasticsearch, or maybe something like Kibana to use it at an even higher level. But if you understand what's actually being encoded down at the wire, you really understand deeply what Elasticsearch is doing, and you can expand that to whatever platform you might be using in the future.
And actually, talk about Kibana for a second, because that would be interesting to folks who aren't going to be in here writing code or, setting up machines or anything like that. Kibana is actually like a really cool front end for the data that you get from Elasticsearch, and you can pull some pretty cool data, and just grab screenshots of it to send out to clients or whatever. But you can aggregate stuff, you can search, you can do all kinds of stuff with Kibana.
Yeah, like I said, it's kind of like your own little Google Analytics platform. It can do a lot of the same stuff, and it's not just limited to weblog data either, although that's what usually people are using it for. You can visualize the works of William Shakespeare, like we said, or anything else you can dream up, and it's pretty easy to use. You definitely do not need to be an engineer to use Kibana.
Cody, do you have any technical questions? Elasticsearch technical questions? Cody's like our resident like super tech expert, so
yeah, that's at least what I tell people anyway. When you are using Elasticsearch from for search, we know it's not just for search, but for search, have you ever used it as a primary data store? I know usually it's kind of like we stream data from our primary store, whether it's DynamoDB or a SQL database. We stream the data after persisting it in, what's called the master of masters to Elasticsearch, where it's kind of indexed asynchronously. And then we have an index search that we can query from, but we're never really directly writing to Elasticsearch.
Right.
Is that, in your experience, the common use case, or do you see instances for search where Elasticsearch is the primary database?
I've never seen someone using it as like their only primary database. Under the hood, it's still an inverted search index, and that has very limited applications, right? It's good for Elasticsearch, but not for a whole lot else. If you really want to be doing, analytical queries, from SQL on a real database, you probably want to have a copy of that somewhere else that's more, quote unquote, authoritative.
And that's right. For what you just said, authoritative, that's because sort of the permanency of Elasticsearch, it's meant to be rebuildable, right? I mean, that's the main reason why you wouldn't want to use kind of the Elasticsearch as the primary, is because it is meant to kind of be like re-indexable in case, something happens. Is that kind of the primary reason there?
Yeah, I mean, you are going to be indexing it in ways that are very specific to your use case. And also, yeah, you kind of touched on the fact that it's really not meant for long-term storage or infinite storage. It has this feature called index lifecycle management that allows you to automate the process of moving data, into read-only storage and maybe ultimately into archive storage over time. I mean, that sounds a lot like some data warehouse solutions, but the way that this works for your search application is likely going to be different than how you're going to be using it in like a OLAP application, right?
Right. Exactly. What about the geo capabilities of Elasticsearch? And I'm kind of asking questions that I'm working with right now. Have you used the geo capabilities of Elasticsearch, and how do they compare to sort of a geospatial database like now Postgres offers?
And the only thing that I've tinkered with myself is really the IP to geo stuff. So, it can localize IP addresses in your web logs to where they came from, and that seems to work. But yeah, it also has the ability to search by region, right? So if you actually have geo data in there that's geo encoded, you could do searches like, find all the restaurants within 5 miles of where I am, sorted by some criteria. It's cool. I can't say I have firsthand experience in how well it works, but I think it works.
And that's what that's one of the projects we're working on, is finding restaurants within certain areas. And immediately we're doing real estate listings within a certain area, and we're most likely going to do so with Elasticsearch, where traditionally we've done that at the DynamoDB level or the Postgres level or something like that. So it's we'll let you know how it goes.
It should go well. I mean, that capability's been around for a while now, so I would think it's pretty well evolved.
Yeah. Yep.
Can I just ask real quick, is that a Klingon sword behind you?
Yes, that is a batleth.
A batleth. Is that what they call it?
Yes,
thought I
of course.
recognized
Doesn't
it.
everyone know that? Jeez. Yeah, this is
Um,
my cave. It's full of Star Trek stuff.
Do you watch the new Star Trek, the CBS All Access one?
I did, yes.
I heard it's not great.
Uh, all right. Yeah, I'm not digging it, to be honest. It's just got a very different look and feel from the previous series, shall we say. It's kind
Yeah.
of like Game of Thrones in space, to tie back to our original conversation.
It's like an action show, right? It's like the new Star Trek movies. It's basically.
I would say the new Star Trek movies at least are more respectful of the existing franchise than this new show is. But don't get me ranting on Star Trek stuff. It could get ugly.
Talk about the other. You talked about Hadoop, and I think you mentioned Spark. How does Elasticsearch compare to those, and like what are use cases for one versus the other?
Yeah, I mean, Elasticsearch, seems to have found this pigeonhole of search and log analysis, right? Whereas Spark is for more heavy-duty operations, where like you don't necessarily need an answer back in milliseconds. You can wait, a minute or two to get back a result. So it's, used for things that are more like, well, usually either in data processing, like transforming data as it's going from one place to another, or for even doing things like machine learning and graph analysis and things like that. So it's really meant for distributing, bigger, meatier problems where you actually have to like write code to figure out how to do it. Whereas Elasticsearch is like, here's some documents, go index them, and I want answers back.
Right.
So,
Do your other courses use Hadoop or Spark, or are they?
Yeah, we got courses on all of that. So,
Okay.
one of the other courses offered by Manning is the Ultimate Big Data, which talks about, how do I use a Hadoop cluster to do all of this stuff? And it turns out you can run Spark on top of Hadoop. So Spark gets mentioned in that course as well.
What do you think about in terms of the education sector? And this is your wheelhouse here. Like we're undergoing this kind of idea where that almost everyone, regardless of your job sector, should have technical skills, and even more specific than technical skills, like actually programming skills. Do you think that's feasible, that everyone kind of can learn programming at some level to be able to incorporate that into their job functions?
I don't think you have to be a coder to be a technologist necessarily. I mean, obviously, if you're going to call yourself a software engineer, then yes. But, if you want to be like a PM or, a director or something like that, you just have to understand how the technology works at a higher level, what its limitations are, and things like that. So I've actually created some executive briefing courses for that sort of a market where it's not getting into how do I write code to make this happen, but I do touch on the architecture, the names of the technologies, how they fit together. You just need to know what the pieces are that are available and how you might be able to put them together, and options for actually obtaining and managing and maintaining that technology.
Have you seen a lot of success from your courses online in terms of, I guess there's two things. One is how many people actually like complete the course and go through it all. I don't know if you can see those metrics. And I guess the other thing is, I don't know if yours have quizzes or tests or projects or anything like that, but do you see a lot of participation in that if they do?
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, there are a lot of people who just buy courses and hoard them and never actually take them. So
I mean,
usually,
I will say I'm guilty of that. I have like
yeah.
3,000 courses. I have more courses than I could get through in like 4 lifetimes.
See what I'm saying? But yeah, there's a lot of you. But yeah, I mean, actually, the percentages in terms of like out of the people that buy the course, how many complete it is kind of depressing. But
Yeah.
there's enough that it still adds up. So it's a law of large numbers. Like I said, I've had like 300,000 enrollments to these courses over the past few years, and if even 1 or 2% of them finish that, then that's still a big impact.
That's
so
a lot
I'm
of
happy
people.
with
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
I mean, it's not really any different than like regular courses. I mean, if you get 10% of the class paying attention and actually engaged, then you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, that's fair. And again, it's all about scale. So even though like a small percentage actually finish it, it's still a big number in the end. Even though these courses are very cheap and affordable, it's still a lot of money in the end. So it's all about numbers and volume at the end of the day, and the impact that it has.
I will say that's probably why I have so many courses. They always do those deals where it's like you can get 100 courses for $5. It's like, well, how can I turn down that deal? And then they always have the retail prices like $150,000, but you can get it for $5.
Oh yeah, that's always the play there.
Do you think MOOCs are going to, or online education is going to sort of make the older style of education obsolete? Do you think everything like a Ready Player One style where everyone just goes to school virtually? You ever see that happening?
I mean, it kind of seems like we're heading in that direction. I mean, I have a daughter in college right now, and half of her classes are online already.
Really?
So, it's not a crazy concept. I think the bigger question is the role of accreditation and who's like curating this content and saying, yes, if you completed this course and completed all the exercises and activities within, that means something. You can put that on your resume, and an employer will care about that, right? So that's kind of like the big unknown of where this is going.
I mean, we should touch base on that because we've actually had ideas on how to sort of integrate online courses with existing course material so that the students who actually take the courses can prove that they've actually learned something, and like how to automate, not just automate multiple choice test questions, because that's sort of an easy part, but to automate writing actual code and creating programs and stuff like that. I mean, if you could figure that out, that'd be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, there are some platforms that are doing that. They have the ability to include coding exercises and activities as part of the course, and you can actually submit that and get feedback on it automatically.
Yeah, Udacity does that pretty well. They've gotten better since the original days of the OMSCS program, but that would be something of a game changer. I guess it'd be tough for the humanities. It's always tough for the humanities, though, grading stuff, but something where there isn't a definitive answer or a definitive right way to do it. I'm not sure how much.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, you need some one-on-one interaction with the student, and that's where the scalability starts to become a problem, right? So, I have to hire people to like answer all the questions on my courses and, escalate to me if there's something they don't know. And I would imagine a similar model could work on like, grading assignments basically, so
I wonder if there could be like some kind of like if you do like Teach for America, they waive your student loans. Like you could sign up for a course, and then if you were like a TA for the next semester of the course, you wouldn't have to pay the fee for the course you took or something like that. Like a pay it forward model.
I'd like that better because I wouldn't have to pay them.
Yes. Yeah, I guess that would work out.
It's like Vermont has something now where if you go to medical school and then basically and then you do your residency in Vermont for 7 years, they'll pay off your medical school debt, which is crazy.
Wow.
But that's kind of the thing that I would like to see kind of companies go to, is an integrated relationship with institution or educational institutions, where the company's like, hey, look, if we take a student of yours and they stay with us for 7 years afterwards, we'll pay for their we'll retroactively wipe out their debt. I mean, there's just a big disconnect between the working world and the educational world right now.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, I think ideally the world that we want to be working toward in the world of MOOCs, at least, is to not have that debt to begin with. Like, why should we have to like spend $100,000 to get an accredited degree when I could learn that same information online in, a fraction of the time at a fraction of the cost? So there's sort of this existential question as to the role of, these big educational institutions, vis-a-vis these online programs that are available now.
Yeah, I mean, if the only effect it had is bringing down tuition fees, which have gotten absolute bananas, I mean, that would be a huge win already.
Yeah, and in tech especially, I mean, if you go to school in this stuff, what you learn is going to be obsolete in 6 months, right? And
yeah, at the outside. Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, totally. So, we do see like a lot of corporate programs being rolled out on these MOOCs these days now. So they have like, programs specifically for businesses where businesses can subscribe to the MOOC platform and give their employees unlimited access to what's in their catalog. And this is appealing because, it allows their employees to get training on specific technologies that are relevant to what they're trying to do. They can make sure they're getting like the latest and greatest information because there's a lot of competition in the MOOC space. So there's always going to be someone teaching the latest, newest iteration of that technology pretty quickly. And it's all very low cost as well. So from a practical standpoint, that model makes a lot of sense.
Although I will say your videos are like really well produced. What kind of setup do you have? What kind of software? Like, do you just have, do you have like a little home studio kind of thing or office?
Yeah,
studio?
I mean, I'm in it. So this is where I record them all. So
do you use a green screen?
Not anymore.
Okay.
I did in that course. So yeah, that weird background was a green screen effect.
It looked pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know. Green screen's more trouble than it's worth, I think. But that's a
I mean,
video.
you're preaching to the choir there. We both have green screens sitting under our desks right now that we used to use and no longer use.
Yeah, it's like unless you have to like pretend that you're someplace where you're not, there's just no reason to use it, right? So
See, that's what we need to do. We need to like do the live stream from like outer space or the moon or something like that. We need to.
Yeah, that would be a legit use of green screen.
We're broadcasting live from the Sputnik.
Cody, do you have any more technical questions?
No, this has been fascinating and really good information, and it's just been really informational for me and fun to talk about, to geek out and talk about technical stuff for sure.
And I will say a quick shout out to our next series. And Frank, you might want to jump back on with us. You're always welcome, obviously. But the next 10-part series we're going to do is basically on like hot button ethical issues in technology. So we're going to talk about, crypto and what cryptocurrency is used for. Talk about Russia's involvement in all sorts of nefarious tech practices.
Yeah, we got a lot of good stuff lined up.
Yeah, and I mean, I
can talk a lot.
Yeah, I think we didn't really touch on it, but like the ethics of machine learning in general and sort of the ethical quandaries that arise from that. So we'll definitely give you a shout when we're recording those episodes, and you're welcome to hop on and talk through any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's near and dear to my heart because, a lot of those recommender system technologies that we created back at Amazon have since been used to, do personalization on Facebook and YouTube. And, it's created these filter bubbles and echo chambers. And I don't feel good about that,
Yeah.
So.
Or like there's like the standard story of the girl who got coupons for like diapers and formula and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the dad had no idea that she was pregnant and that whole thing, and raised a ruckus at Target, I think it was. So there's definitely some stuff to talk about.
Yeah, and AI in general has all sorts of ethical issues surrounding it too. A lot of people just build stuff because they can and don't think about how it's going to be used. And a lot of people train these systems on data that's inherently biased to begin with, and that leads to other problems. So I can talk forever about that stuff.
I mean, we'll send you the lineup. And cool. You're welcome to hop on any episode that you want. And hopefully Google Hangouts won't be the white screen of death next time.
Let's hope.
I assume they'll work that out. But I guess that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. The blog post for this episode will be available at gunnertech.com, podcast on iTunes. Our ebooks are available on Amazon. Speaking of Amazon, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, iBooks, and anywhere else ebooks are sold. Hop on our Facebook page and answer our question of the week, which this week is, did you watch the series finale of Game of Thrones Season 8? We're marking Frank down as a hard no on that because he's never actually watched it, because he watches good shows like Star Trek and Star Trek The Next Generation. Right. But anyone else, hop on our Facebook page and answer that question of the week and sign up for our Country Store giveaway. Country Store is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. You can visit them at countrystoreoutfitters.com. That's going to do it for this week's episode. Frank, I want to thank you so much again for joining us. It was a pleasure having
me. Yeah, thanks for having me.
And for anyone who's interested in Frank's course, the links are down below. We also have like a special discount code that you can use to grab that course, and I guess any of Frank's other courses as well. I think it's like a across the board Manning discount. So maybe any course period that Manning offers, TBD.
Yes.
And what we're also going to do, we have 2 codes for your series that we're going to give away through a couple of Twitter contests. So keep an eye out on our Twitter feed to sign up for those contests and potentially win a free pass to Frank's awesome series, which is called, by the way, Elasticsearch 6 and Elastic Stack, I think.
Yep, in depth and hands-on.
Awesome. So definitely check that out. Thanks for tuning in. That's going to do it for this week's episode. I'm Derry, that's Cody, and that's Frank. Cody and I will see you next week.